Hi, church family. I'm very excited this weekend to start a new series that'll take us through the book of Psalms. We believe that the Psalms are versatile, formative, and very applicable to our current situation. The Psalms give us words when we don't know how to pray, and give us sight when we can't see God at work. And so through the months ahead, we're going to have a variety of speakers reflect on Psalms that have been meaningful to them. And you're invited to join with us as we enter the Psalms as a means of guiding our worship and discernment of God's presence in our lives. I want to take a few minutes to unpack a verse from Psalm 56 that has been pretty meaningful in my own life. Easter's now a few weeks behind us. Like those first disciples, we're still trying to come to grips with this new reality that we find ourselves in. One of the debilitating effects of this pandemic is the profound and pervasive sense of loss that has left no part of our lives untouched. Loss is something that we all hold in common right now, and there's a lot to grieve these days. For some, we were already carrying grief and loss when this season came upon us. For others, we're grieving because this pandemic has taken things from us. Predictability, social attachments, security, and the list goes on. And there are those among us who are finding that grieving is acutely more difficult and complicated because of this pandemic. Many of our familiar ways of processing grief have been thwarted, and rather than finding comfort or restoration, we're finding that our grief is being amplified by disruptions and limitations imposed upon us. This Sunday we gather around this phrase found in Psalm 56. You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. As we reflect on this portion of the psalm, you're invited to consider how it resonates with you and how it meets you where you're at. You keep track of all my sorrows. God sees our grief. Grieving can be very isolating. Loneliness compounds the severity of grief. And yet, in grief, you are never truly alone. Even if no one can see your grief, God sees. Even if you can't find the words, God can. Even if no one understands, God does. Every cry, every shudder, every whimper, every whisper, every scream, nothing goes unnoticed by God. He is, as Hagar exclaimed, the God who sees me, the God who draws nearer in grief. When our eyes are full of tears, God's eyes are fully on us. You've collected all my tears in your bottle. God not only sees our grief, God values our grief. More than just being aware of our sorrow, He treasures it, keeps it close to Him. It isn't discarded or treated with flippancy, but He compassionately keeps our grief safe. Not a single tear is missing. This doesn't always match our experience in life. Many times we receive messages that tears are not welcome, that tears are not safe. And yet, no matter how hard we try to hide our tears, no matter how many tears we cry, each one is precious in God's sight. You have recorded each one in your book. God sees our grief, God values our grief, and God bears our grief. He holds it for us and with us. Sorrow is often viewed as being burdensome. Sometimes we aim to suppress our grief because it seems like it is too much to handle on our own. It is. All sorrow, any sorrow, is too much for anyone to carry on their own. Sorrow suffered alone is septic. It is meant to be shared. And so God does more than just witness and cherish our grief. He enters into it. He embraces it, and He personally experiences it with us. We are loved by a God who cries with us. Jesus wept. He was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Our tears are not a barrier to God. Grief is not diametrically opposed to faith. Rather, tears are like saline prayers. Jesus validates and dignifies our suffering by joining with us in our sorrow. And through his followers, through Christians around the world, Jesus still walks among those who grieve. For we are to follow his example, to mourn with those who mourn, and carry each other's burdens. You keep track of all my sorrows. You've collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. How does this prayer shape your posture and perspective today? I encourage you to go to our website and download the at-home worship guide that this video recording is a part of. And feel free also to engage with others on our social media account. May God bless you this week. May you find God in the grieving.